It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Thursday, July the 11th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, David Williams. He's produced the program. Let's get it going. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So Canada has now found out who they'll face in the bronze medal game at Copa America. Colombia beat Uruguay last night, and that was quite the event. It's not untold or unheard of in South American soccer for the game to end in a brawl, which it did. Fans engaging players. It was quite the scene. So Canada gets Uruguay in the bronze medal game on Saturday, and of course Colombia will go on to face Argentina for the championship. But as Brian mentioned, in the Euros, which has been a terrific tournament, so England down 1-0 early to the Netherlands. They come back, Harry Kane on a suspect penalty call anyway. Kane slots one to tie it up, and then his replacement, Ollie Watkins, the Aston Villa man, comes on to score in the 90th minute. England move through, and they're off to the final to take on Spain. So for Harry Kane, it was a 66th goal for his country, the most of all time. 66 is a notable number in the world of English soccer. They haven't won a major tournament since 1966, when the World Cup, the 8th World Cup, was held in England, as a matter of fact. The English beat West Germany 4-2 in the final to win their first ever World Cup. It was 2-2 after 90 minutes, went to extra time. Jeff Hurst scored 2 goals to complete his hat-trick, the first to be scored in a men's World Cup final. So England were the 5th nation to win the event, the 3rd host country to win after Uruguay won in 1930, Italy in 1934. The 2-time reigning champions that year, Brazil, failed to get through the group stage, were beat by Hungary and Portugal. So 1966 and 66 goals for Harry Kane. Can they finally win a major event? All right, a couple of very quick, interesting baseball notes. On this date, 1914, Babe Ruth made his debut in Major League Baseball. Of course, began his career as a pitcher, twice won 20 games. He wanted to play every day, so converted to be an outfielder, and as we all know, broke the home run record in 1919, a career record of 1,714 home runs. That stood for 39 years, and of course, that was 1914 Major League debut for the Bambino, Babe Ruth. And on this date, 1985, Nolan Ryan became the first Major League pitcher to earn 4,000 strikeouts in a career. Ended his career with 5,714, first all time. Almost 1,000 ahead of Randy Johnson, whose second was 4,875. All right, there you go. All right, congratulations to a friend of mine and a great sportsman, Trevor Murphy. Trevor Murphy has had an outstanding career in sports as an athlete, as an administrator. He's been part of the 2025 Canada Games Host Society Senior Leadership Team from 2003 to 2008. Murphy led the delivery of hockey development programs in Atlantic Canada as the manager of Hockey Canada's regional centre in St. John. Of course, his role with the Ice Caps, his role with the Growlers, and now he's been tapped to be the Vice President of Hockey Development for Hockey Canada. So, of course, that's going to be a critically important role for the strategic direction for grassroots hockey development across the country. So, yet another Newfoundlander and Labradorian into the front office in serious senior hockey roles. You know, Ryan Clough down in San Jose, Derek Clancy in Toronto, of course, in the NHL, and Trevor Murphy, VP Hockey Operations or Hockey Development Hockey Canada. That's magnificent news for him. All right, let's keep going. Price of gas up. 5th straight week the price has jumped. It's up about 8 cents since early June, so not insignificant jump at the pumps. And of course, I'll throw it back out there for your consideration, especially if you're listening from more rural parts of the province. There's a proposal where the PUB is looking for feedback about the concept of changing the way they apply the formula for the price of gas. if it goes through, if you're living on Fogo Island or living in St. Brendan's or what have you, the price is going to jump 5 cents right away for you. If you're living in town, 0.7 cents. So a huge disparity when we talk about the price of delivery to more rural, remote parts of the province. So put that back out there in case you're interested. Price of diesel up by 1.5 cents, or gas went up by 1.9 cents. Diesel up 1.6, furnace oil increased 1.34, stove oil went up the same amount, propane increased 1.3 cents per litre, which is a bit of a jump for propane, because that's usually pretty stable price of fuel. Okay, fuel. Marine Atlantic. So the good news is the Alisuanu is now on the Argentia run, but it does not come with further disruptions in service. On the July the 17th and the 18th, there's going to be crossings cancelled of Argentia. That affects another 439 passengers on July 17th, 501 passengers on July 18th. This because some of the crew still have to go through some of the additional familiarization drills as part of their safety management program. Of course, they were taxed with operating on a pretty significant uptick in runs on the Port of Basque run. So if you're a passenger on the 17th or 18th of July, you're out of luck if you had an Argentia passage booked. Okay. And on that front, you know, we talk about where the Veteran and the Legionnaire were built and at the damaged shipyards in Romania and all the problems that persist with those two vessels. It's a wonder why, you know, just given where we live and right on the North Atlantic, and of course seafaring people, it's a wonder that we've lost so much of our own shipbuilding capacity. You know, whether it be the Grey Sparks and the Hazel McIsaac built out in the Cowhead fabrication. And then you had Marystown building several vessels, including the Flanders, of course, which is now in dry dock because of a fire. You know, it stands to reason that as seafaring people, and our location on the North Atlantic, that it's a real wonder why we've lost so much shipbuilding capacity. Not only for our own needs inside the fishery or whatever the case may be, or in the ferry system, but you know, the big shipyards around the world, they draw international business, employ hundreds if not thousands of people. It's just a real unfortunate development that we've lost so much of our shipbuilding capacity here in the province. You want to talk about it? We can do it. And this is a good one. We know that the Canadian Transportation Agency, of course, is taxed with dealing with the complaints coming from airline passengers for disruption in travel. The backlog is about 72,000. And I did not know this was the case, but here we go. Now, at the CTA, they're pressuring passengers to stay silent about rulings on their complaints. So the regulator says it falls within their authority and their mandate under law. Apparently, there were amendments made to the Canada Transportation Act that says the regulator can't decide to keep confidential any part of an order except for several key parts of the ruling, such as flight number, date, and whether a delay was within the carrier's control, and that's at the request of the complainant, or the airline. So apparently, all sides have to agree for someone to be allowed to go to their Facebook page or their Twitter feed or Instagram or TikTok and give the details of the ruling. It may indeed be okay by law, but in the reality of fairness and all these important rulings taking place now, in essence, in a black hole, it's ridiculous. It should not be the case where I'm not allowed to say what happened when I went to the Canadian Transportation Agency and had to deal with the incredible backlog of 72,000 complaints before they get to me, all the while being pestered by my carrier to settle for pennies on the dollar, and then a ruling comes forward and I'm not allowed to say what it is. I mean, it's just absolutely pathetic. So apparently the amendments have been made to the Act, but that doesn't sit well, I don't imagine, with anybody who's currently sitting in front of the CTA waiting patiently for their claim to be adjudicated. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. All right, and you know, we did have Minister Abbott yesterday, the Minister of Infrastructure and Transportation. We didn't broach this particular topic because I kind of get tired of thinking about and talking about the completion of the Team Guzhou Highway. Man, oh man. So it's been decades in the making. We're only 3.3 kilometers short of its completion. It'll connect Topsail Road, where the highway currently ends, to the Commonwealth Avenue, Brookfield Road, and Heavy Tree Road area of Mount Pearl. So it began in 2000, and it may even be older than that because that particular route was discussed in the mid-70s. But here we are in 2024, just an announcement that it's going to take probably another 3 years before it's actually completed. So someone wondered why we didn't broach it. We didn't broach it because it's just one of those sticky, ridiculous numbers that if you want to take it on, we can do it. Okay, I'm not surprised this was the case, because we have been told by the FFAW that disruptions and protests, or whatever the case may be, will take place, all based on the federal government's decision to move into a commercial northern cod fishery. You know the deal. So whether it be about the presence of offshore draggers, foreign fleets, and the gear they use, and or the fact that there has been an agreement in place that was reiterated by the Prime Minister in 2015 for the first 115,000 tons to be allocated to the inshore. And of course, we're nowhere near that. For some reason, they thought there was a threshold that had been met for the stock to be improved enough or healthy enough, even though there's been zero growth since 2016, to move from what was a stewardship fishery, which had been in place since 2006, into this new commercial fishery with only a paltry 18,000 tons. Okay, so at the Environment Ministers meeting yesterday here in the city, which included the Federal Minister, Stephen Guilbeault. So they're all meeting and they're all being addressed from the podium, and then all of a sudden there's a siren. And then there was a speech. Glenn Winslow, one of the harvesters, he spoke to the delegation. There was signs being presented talking about save our cod, history repeated, stop offshore draggers. So they took it upon themselves. And Mr. Winslow said it's an unfortunate development that they feel like they had to do this, but they did it and put the place up, so to speak. So their demands are clear. They want a meeting with the Prime Minister. Whether or not that's going to happen remains to be seen. But this won't be the end of it. You know full well they were going to protest in some form or fashion, and took the opportunity yesterday with what there was, of course, media in the room. And the environment ministers, they're talking about protection of the environment in addition to bottom line and profitability and draggers and gear. So anyway, they went to the environment ministers' meetings yesterday and they roared the siren, and then Mr. Winslow took to the podium and said his piece. And if that's an issue that you'd like to talk about, we can absolutely do it. There has not been, regardless of what party you favor, there really hasn't been a cogent explanation as to why we are where we are with the northern cod stock. You know, they talk about the stock has moved from critical to cautious. Sure it has, but that's just been a tag associated with modeling starting point. Not that there's any more fish. TFO has told us there hasn't been any growth in the stock since 2016, but here we are. So people might point to the strength and the lobbying ability of maybe foreign countries and or the offshore sector. Whatever the case may be, the decision, even though people were clamoring for more tonnage to be added to the total allowable catch, I don't think harvesters were clamoring for a return to the commercial harvest. So anyway, they made their way to the hotel, I think it's at the Sheraton maybe, and that's the development that we saw yesterday. Of course, and we stick with the environment concerns, plenty of emails, a couple of calls about the decision made by Minister Davis, of course, Environment Minister here provincially, to reject all of the appeals that came in regarding the green light for World Energy GH2. If that's of interest to you, it's certainly a lot yet to be understood on those particular proposals, and we're happy to talk about it if you're interested. And I think we're expecting a call this morning about the decision made by Premier Furry to tap Minister John Hogan to be the interim Minister of Health. And I don't think people are wrong to say that that's an awful lot on one minister's plate. Now, it's not to say that the minister responsible for health and community services is dealing with day-to-day operations, but we know the heft of that file, the importance of that file, the so-called, or what people refer to as a crisis in healthcare. So it really is a lot to add on to his already pretty busy portfolio as the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. He's the Government House Leader, Minister responsible for the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, and now Health and Community Services. So whether or not people want to refer to the fact that, you know, does it say, if you read between the lines, that there wasn't enough faith in members of the backbench to be promoted into some ministerial portfolio, and maybe one current minister moved on to take on health community services as a standalone responsibility? But whatever it is, and however long the interim tag will be applied, there's still a lot to that conversation. And when we talked about the MRI wait times, listener Rick sent along this particular website as for the Ottawa Gatineau Imaging Private Clinic. So even if we just stick with MRIs and what it costs, because absolutely people have left the province to pay out of pocket to get this diagnostic imaging. So here you go. A whole body MRI, which is used as a screening tool, not for diagnosis, $3,100. A prostate MRI, $975 plus $275 to apply the contrast agent. So gadolinium is required, or Busco. So a breast MRI, $985 plus $275 for the contrast agent. And of course, then you got to get there. Then you got to stay somewhere. So people may indeed be willing to pay out of pocket. And I would imagine business is pretty brisk at the Ottawa Gatineau Imaging private clinic. Just thought I'd give you some numbers to consider as we wonder aloud whether or not some of these private offerings may indeed become more commonplace across the country, maybe make a presence here. We already have plenty of private health care in this country and long have. So whether it be dentists or chiropractors or otherwise, and some of these things may indeed be covered by insurance, but that's something you need to check before you take it on and travel for, whether it be an MRI or anything else. All right, a couple of quick ones. And I'll get this to the predictable reaction to this, and this is about the presence of tainted cocaine on the streets. The fact of the matter is, in 2023, there were 73 drug-related deaths across the province, a 97% increase from the 37 cases of accidental drug deaths in 2022. Cocaine, the biggest killer, accounting for 34 deaths. So the folks from the Newfoundland Labrador Centre on Substance Abuse saying that the sporadic warnings about tainted supply, whether it be a couple of weeks ago on the West Coast, and then we hear about in Central. So the presence of fentanyl or benzos that are cut into the cocaine has become an obvious problem. And the folks at the Centre for Substance Abuse say the alert should be in place all the time. So, yes, when people say, look, if you're taking drugs, you're taking on the risk. Absolutely. But then when we talk about what is a physiological addiction, people have a hard time kicking it, and maybe takes repeated opportunities to try to enter rehab, to try to do better. Some people might do these types of drugs on a so-called recreational basis, but the fact of the matter is the tainted drug supply is here to stay. This is going to be the rule, not the exception any longer. So for folks in your social circles or in your family, and you know that they dabble or they are addicted, whether it be to never do it alone or the presence of a naloxone kit. And of course, a naloxone kit's not going to save you from a fentanyl overdose. You're going to need multiple naloxone shots. So the supply is apparently quite dangerous. No longer can you trust people that you thought you could trust and where you got your drugs over the years, because now it's pretty safe to say nobody knows what they're getting. So if you're a user, just be extremely careful because the numbers don't lie. 73 deaths last year, up from 37 the year before, and the trend is growing even further this year. Anyway, tough one. Maybe some of those bodies outside or inside the parking garage of the health sciences did indeed fall prey to a drug overdose, and the unclaimed bodies conversation is still around as well. And this one here, I didn't even know if I was going to bring it up, but I mean, thieves are out there and they'll steal the eyes out of your head. But this story coming from Northwest River, someone broke into this lady's trailer. Her name is Sheila Cooper, and they stole food, bottled water, candle, a blanket, and her son's ashes that were in a crystal glass head. So, I mean, they just want it back. And obviously you would want your son's ashes back. And, of course, he died by an overdose. But, like, what's going on here? The people who stole the ashes know what they were stealing? And if you've now found out because of media coverage, now that you know what you have, can you just put it back somewhere where these ashes can be returned to Miss Cooper? But, what a story. All right, a couple of quick ones before we get to you. Of course, Canada and the Prime Minister in Washington for the NATO summit. Some news coming from. Of course, there was always going to be focus on the amount of money we spend or don't spend on defense. Right now, 1.39%, headed towards 1.76% by 29-30. Not good enough, I assume, say many nations, including the Americans. But now, all of a sudden, and of course this is absolutely trying to blunt the criticism, is that we apparently now are moving forward with the procurement of submarines to replace our Victoria-class boats. We've long had a problem here, and we do indeed need submarines. And I guess now we're moving forward. Now, no details. And, of course, this is kind of off the cuff. In the recent past, they talked about the consideration of replacing those submarines. And now we're absolutely doing it. Maybe purchasing up to 12. No understanding of exactly how many. No understanding of proposed cost. But I guess in the wake of international focus on defense spending, especially with our 32 members of NATO, that's been announced. What do you think? Also, of course, the focus on the war in Ukraine was part of the conversation. An additional $500 million coming from the country, our country, to Ukraine support. So that's on top of some proposed $4 billion in arms and munitions that Canada has already pledged and donated. And this following the bilateral meetings between the Prime Minister and the Ukrainian top dog. All right, we're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Our email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. We're going to kick it off talking about the appointment of John Hogan as the interim healthcare minister. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin this morning on line number one. Say good morning to the NDP member for Torngat Mountains. That's Leela Evans. Good morning, Leela. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you. Patty, I was just wanting to talk a little bit about the appointment of Minister Hogan to the health portfolio, but also, too, is what a lot of people are, I guess, not really talking about is the many layers to this issue. We talk a lot now about the healthcare crisis. And within the healthcare crisis, we got the physical health, we got people now that are in crisis. And unless somebody is not trying to access healthcare, people don't really realize how bad it is, like in terms of diagnosis and treatment for cancer, strokes, heart attacks. We talk a lot about that. We're also talking a lot about the mental health crisis, right? And that is a problem that existed, but people are becoming more aware of it. And then, of course, a part of that is the addictions, and you talked a little bit in your preamble about addictions. So that's a major concern for me, because we are in the middle of this healthcare crisis, and the Premier just appointed, even though he had a lot of notice, a minister who's already got a huge portfolio, and that's in justice and public safety. But what hasn't been talked a lot about is the crisis that's in corrections. Minister Hogan is supposed to be dealing with that. And the Auditor General's report that came out was very, very damning. And I'm the critic for justice. I'm aware of it. I raised it in the House of Assembly, when she issued a report. And what was concerning for me is his arrogance in addressing my questions. And he was very flippant. He said, that report is dated. But Patty, at the time, it was shocking for me because none of the issues raised in her report had been addressed. So what I'm worried about as well for the overall province with this appointment is he reacts when he's confronted with issues. He attacks. And I witnessed that when I was in the House of Assembly and I was reading a petition on behalf of sexual assault survivors. And that was in the news very, very briefly, where he came out and he attacked me, and he basically attacked the women who was raising the petition sexual assault survivors, right? And for me, and he very angrily said, sexual assault victims, I think he called them, sexual assault victims can't be re-traumatized by the justice system. And we all know that. And so Patty, for me, I'm also the critic for health, and I'm on 2 all-party committees with health, the Quality Council and the one for the mental health and addictions. And Minister Tom Osborne was very active and involved in the healthcare. So it's not like he's going to float on the top as the minister. These are huge crises that the province is facing. And for the Premier to appoint him as the interim minister after having months to go through his caucus, even if he had to move people around, portfolios around, to get a competent minister that could continue on with the work that's supposed to be done to address these issues. Because at the end of the day, healthcare is different than any other portfolio, because the lives of the people in the province depends on it. And Patty, look at the travel nurses. That's going to be unveiled exactly how much the province wasted on travel nurses. And I say wasted because a lot of that money, if they were on the ball and had been planning and trying to deal with it, they would invest it into our nurses that live and work in the province, that wants to have a profession here, that wants to have quality of life. And the only reason why a lot of nurses have left the province or the profession is because the province has burnt them out. So for me, sorry, Patty, I tend to go on.
There was a lot to the opening remarks. just from where I sit, look, and I know that the health minister and other ministers may not be intimately involved in day-to-day operations, but you're right in saying that healthcare is a unique portfolio. I would go on to further suggest that healthcare has a direct relationship with other ministerial portfolios, such as justice, as John Hogan already holds, such as education and Minister Howell's department, because most things come back to healthcare. You know, even if we talk about Fred Hutton's role as the housing minister and the amount of homelessness, the reports coming very clearly from Toronto, the cost of healthcare delivery for those who are homeless are double what they are for people with a roof over their head. So the health minister would really have direct relationship with a lot of other departments, which makes it a huge responsibility that I don't think can be handled with other responsibilities on your table. Because, I mean, it's not just justice and public safety. He's the government house leader, responsible for the privacy commissioner. So there's a lot going on for John Hogan. Now, I'm sure the support of senior bureaucrats can make it quasi-manageable for the short term, but in the long term, we need a permanent solution here. And I know that it's always a problem for the people of the province when we have the ministers rotate so frequently. By the time you get up to speed and get a firm grasp about what you should be doing as the minister, you move on to the next task. But in health, we need stability. We need continuity. We need someone in that portfolio on the long term, as long as he or she is up to the task, as long as he or she is doing a good job. So health is, as you said, absolutely a different kettle of fish. Now we can move on to things like travel nurses. I think we've understood quite clearly how we've found ourselves in this reliance on travel nurses. What I don't quite understand is exactly what they say is the plan to further reduce our reliance on these travel nurses, to try to get back to pre-pandemic levels. No one's really told me exactly how that's going to unfold or how that's supposed to work or what the target will indeed be for the long run, because once you bring them into the fold, then it kind of feels like they're here to stay. So do you understand what the plan is to reduce our reliance on the travel nurses?
For me, that's something that the new minister would have to take on. And in actual fact, if we don't have a full-time minister, a lot of these problems are just going to continue on. Our reliance, and Patty, the millions and millions of dollars that we're spending. For me, if I would have been health minister when all this was unfolding, I would have said, well, my father always said to me, are you just throwing good money away after bad? Because to continue to rely on the travel nurses really was throwing good money after bad. We should have started pulling some of that money back, and we should have started investing in our nurses so they would stay. We wouldn't have had that problem and the continued reliance on travel nurses. Because if you go out into the healthcare profession and you say, why have the nurses left? Why can't we recruit nurses? And they'll say right to your face, because we don't have quality of life. We can't take time off when and this is such stuff, Patty, I've talked about last year and the year before. We can't take time off. We can't even plan to attend a wedding. We can't even plan our own weddings. We can't plan things with our families, with our kids. And at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, a lot of people have said, I have to start putting my family first. I have to start putting my own physical and mental health first. And that's what the nurses were saying. And that's why a lot of them left. But Patty, let's look over to corrections that Minister Hogan is the current minister of, right? You talked about the Privacy Commission. You ask any reporter, like the public needs to know this, any reporter, okay, if you send in an ATIP, how long is that going to take to get that report back? We're looking at the backlog is huge. So you look at policing. We know from what's going on in the media. I mean, I'm talking about we as like the public, general public. I mean, we know that there's a lot of issues in policing. So it's not that he's a master. It's not that he's like the chosen one, because his own department is riddled with crises that he hasn't properly addressed. And I've witnessed it myself, and I've been attacked for it in the House of Assembly. But at the end of the day, when you look at this, why was he appointed? No, the Premier had months to go through his cabinet, to come up with, even if he had to shuffle, like we said, to find somebody competent put forward that to deal with the crisis, the biggest, I would say this is the biggest crisis right now the province is facing. But, Patty, was it because he didn't have the depth in his caucus, or was it because he's trying to rebuild up Hogan's image? Because I got to tell you, when he attacked me in the House of Assembly and he attacked sexual assault survivors by saying my petition was wrong, it was inaccurate, and what I was saying wasn't truthful, and that was the words of sexual assault survivors. That wasn't my words. The petition came from a round table with sexual assault survivors, and with the petition. And then to say that, his attack on me, he had to feel it because a lot of lawyers in the province and a lot of judges reached out to our office, to me directly, and they were furious with him. And so I think that's where his contrition come from. He's a very ignorant, sorry about that, he's a very arrogant minister, and it's difficult to deal with when you have to have issues addressed. And when you look at Tom Osborne was quite the opposite. But I got to tell you, Tom Osborne was a workhorse when it come to his ministerial duties. And in addition to that, we're going to ask him now to take on the all-party committees that's supposed to be reworking how the province manages its healthcare systems, the all-party committee on quality councils. That's what that's about. And the other all-party committee that's going on at the same time is on mental health and addictions. And that's a huge problem that we're trying to solve. And Patty, the reason why I'm calling in today is I am the justice critic, and I'm also the critic for health, and I'm also on both of those all-party committees. So I have firsthand knowledge of what's going on. And to appoint a minister, an interim minister, to deal with health while they're already dealing with corrections and policing, to me, there's something really rotten to this onion. And I call it an onion because there's so many layers to it, the general public can't see it because they're only looking in from the surface.
I appreciate the time, Leila. Thanks for this.
Yes, and thank you very much for having me on, Patty.
Take care. All right, bye-bye. There you go. Leila Evans, the NDP member for Torngat Mountains. Let's take a break. When we come back, the wind energy appeals. Apparently some 15 groups opposed. I think all 15 made a formal appeal to the Environment Minister, Bernard Davis, about the green light for rural energy GH2. All have been dismissed or rejected or denied. That, and we're going to talk about running the rocks. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to Mary Ellen Ambrosica. Good morning, Mary Ellen. You're on the air.
Hi there.
Hi there. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Are you one of the runners, Mary Ellen?
So, yeah, I'm one of the runners and one of the fundraisers.
Terrific. So what's your role on the HMCS St. John's?
So on the St. John's, I'm a naval electronic sensor operator. So I work in the operations department, and I've been currently running the HMCS St. John's social media as we're going here through Newfoundland with our run.
How long have you been a member of the Navy?
So I've been in for 11 years. I was in the Army before, and then I remustered and came over to the Navy about 4 years ago.
Well, welcome to the province. Welcome to the show. Tell us about how the run's going so far.
It's going absolutely amazing. We've had some really wicked heat the last few days. It's nice to have a little bit of rain this morning, but our support that we've been getting from all of the communities we've been stopping in, we just finished up at Woody Point there yesterday, and when we left, we had a check for $11,700 from that super small community. We're posted up in Springdale and Grand Falls right now, and we're having an amazing time. It's just spectacular to be here. And
the fundraising seems to be going pretty well. What's the tally stand at this morning?
So I have a rough number. I know we're around the $100,000 mark. I kind of let Make-A-Wish make those announcements. So we're just kind of working together right now and keeping it all. We have a lot of money that we're collecting. We're doing fantastic. We're hitting all of our goals, and we're breaking records here this year. Yeah, and the record was set last year at $132,000. Now, fingers crossed, but it looks like, and I'll be cautiously optimistic that you're going to break that record this year. We're really optimistic that that's what's going to happen. We just want to bring as many wishes to the province of Newfoundland and Labrador as we possibly can. And, of course, they average about $10,000 per wish, and some really great stories. And I know you're actually meeting some of the wish recipients along the way. Yes, we did a Rory ceremony with an individual that just got her wish granted. She wants to go to the San Diego Zoo to meet a tiger.
That's right.
So we were really truly blessed to be able to participate in her ceremony and to be able to deliver that for her. We've been getting people stopping and telling us that their children were wish recipients, and now that they've gone on to lead perfectly normal, healthy lives, but they always remember that opportunity that they were given. We've had some other individuals who've been wish recipients and it maybe hasn't gone the right way, and everybody's just been so supportive and lovely and just accommodating. The generosity of this province is it's amazing.
We're pretty good like that. So what's on tap for today?
So right now, myself and my fundraising partner, we're here still in Springdale. We're posted up at the Tim Hortons. We have our runners are en route to Grand Falls, so they are currently running along the highway to get there. And the rest of our fundraising team is posted up in Grand Falls right now collecting donations. Where
are you from originally, Mary Ellen?
So I'm from Pictou County, Nova Scotia.
Right. Well, it's good to have you on the show. Say hello to all hands involved, whether it be representing Make-A-Wish or your 16 crew members of the HMCH St. John's, the wish recipients and everyone involved. So this is a great effort, and I think this is year 29, if I'm not mistaken, of Run the Rock. So good luck. Sure. Be careful out there.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Mary Ellen. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Here we go. Bye-bye. There's one of the runners running the rock. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Dennis O'Keefe. You're on the air.
Hi, Paddy. How are you this morning?
Not too bad, I suppose. How about you?
Not bad. By about 8 o'clock this morning, I just finished a long, almost 24 hours of pressure washing my daughter's back deck. So I'm primed now and ready to go. I got 2 or 3 issues I just want to bring up.
Okay.
One is the most controversial, the portfolio health that is in crisis, the portfolio health that costs us, the taxpayers of Newfoundland and Labrador, by far the largest portion, I think nearly 50% of our budget, and we have a part-time minister. Now, how ridiculous is that? At this time in healthcare, right across Newfoundland and Labrador, with all of the problems that we're having, none of the solutions that seem to be working, big things, little things, even we still don't know who or how many are out on Airport Road. I mean, that's fallen into oblivion somewhere. So all of this is going on, and we have a government that apparently doesn't have the talent level enough to find somebody to be the Minister of Health. And so now the part-time minister, we now have 2 part-time ministers. Mr. Hogan is the part-time Minister of Health and the part-time Minister of Justice. And how ridiculous is that? It points again to the lack of talent in this government, that they can't reach out and find a replacement minister. Secondly, I think you mentioned this morning that the wind energy appeals are all in and they're all rejected. Is that so?
That's how it's reported, and that's the comments coming from the minister responsible, yeah.
Well, Minister Davis, right?
Yeah.
Minister Davis now needs to tell us, the public, the people in Newfoundland and Labrador who are going to be paying one way or another for this project if it gets to go ahead. We need to find out how these appeals were evaluated, if they were evaluated, what was the method of evaluation, and who did the evaluations. Not good enough for him to say there were 15 appeals and they were all rejected. By whom? By John Risley? So come on, Minister Davis.
But what do we get out of the fact? Let's say Minister Davis comes out and says it was Susan Jones and Bobby Whitfield did the review. Then what?
Well, then I'd really be upset, because I want to know if qualified independent people looked at those appeals. That's all I want to know. And if the 2 people you mentioned...
Oh, I don't even know who they are. They were fictitious characters. I just made up names.
I know, but I'm just saying, if they weren't fictitious and they were qualified independently to look at these appeals and dismiss them, that's fine, as long as they go through the process. And that's the problem right along with this project. The protest or the process is willy-nilly. So, Bernard Davis, needs to come clean on this, and we, the public, need to know when our government asks us, gives us an opportunity, the public, to appeal, we need to know that our appeals are being evaluated judiciously and fairly and independently by people who are qualified to do it.
Now, not to be saucy,
okay,
but even if we get the information you're looking for folks who are members of these some 15 groups, nobody's going to be satisfied with that additional information. They're still going to be disappointed or frustrated or angry about the fact that their appeal was rejected or denied. But here's from the Minister, and I'll let you react. So Minister Davis says the government followed its legislative process to determine there was no reason to accept the appeals concerning the project's environmental assessments. He goes on to say, there was a full consultation. The environmental assessment process is very fulsome. It covers a variety of different departments. We put things in place that allow for those concerns that were raised to be mitigated, and obviously that's where we've upheld that decision. It goes on to talk about some 60 different conditions that need to be met, pre-construction, construction, and through the duration of the project's lifespan. Talk about water and noise monitoring, and the fact, regarding the roads, to ensure the roads can handle the weight of the equipment that's going to be carried about the Port-au-Port Peninsula and beyond. So that's basically what it is. Now, I was led to believe, and now apparently I got an email from one of the groups this morning saying that they did not receive their formal email saying that their appeal was rejected, because apparently inside that email, when they get it, it's supposed to walk them through why they're appealed, because all the appeals might not be on the same thing. Some things might have been just about water, maybe about noise, maybe environmental footprint, maybe about export and hydrogen and, ammonia, so who knows? But apparently the email is supposed to walk you through why your appeal was rejected. At least that's what they say.
And that's fine if that's what happens. If each of the groups that had their appeal rejected are told why and by whom and how their appeals were rejected, then fine. That tells me that the proper process was followed. Right now, most of what you read, there's a term for that. It's called gobbledygook. Until we find out, Minister Davis, let's boil it down to, again, if there's a letter going out to all of these groups, then it had better itemize to their satisfaction how, and the methodology that was followed. That's all, so that the process is legitimate and the process is followed. They may not agree, I may not agree, but we've always said about this project and other projects in Newfoundland and Labrador that proper process should always be followed. No shortcuts, no deals behind closed doors, none of that should be going on. And so we'll see now when the various groups receive the appeals. The last thing, Paddy, I know I don't want to take up all your time. I mentioned to you a while ago that I was going to meet with the Public Utilities Board on the petroleum products pricing review.
Right.
So I did meet with some of their regulatory committee for an hour and a half one afternoon, one hot afternoon. It was an extremely good meeting, a very fair exchange of information. And we went down through some of the more contentious recommendations that are in that review. And I also, and I indicated to them at the time that I was contemplating doing this, but I have made up my mind now that I will be a presenter at the hearings when the hearings take place, and I'll be there with a presentation on behalf of the Consumer Group for Fair Gas Prices. So I just wanted to, because when I talked to you last about this, I indicated that this meeting was coming up. It did, to be fair to the PUB, and it was an excellent meeting. I got to say, we, they had a lot of technical information because the two regulators who were there were very, very good, I must say. And there were only four of us at the table, and It went well, and I'm going to follow up now with a presentation, and I'll be notifying the Public Utilities Board of that today.
Fair enough.
So I'll keep you up to date on that also, Paddy.
I appreciate that. But very quickly before I let you go, and I threw this out there the other day, see if I could get a reaction. Because remember back when Paul Davis was the Premier and he appointed Judy Manning to be the Minister of Justice and Public Safety, she also went on to say that she might not necessarily run in the very next by-election available to her because she wasn't an elected member. And the fury was very quick. And of course, her tenure didn't last very long. I mentioned the other day that, look, when John Hagee, an actual doctor, was the Minister of Health, many people weren't even satisfied with having a doctor as the Minister of Health. When in fact, if we want to have a firm understanding of the system, a background in medicine might be helpful. I thought, what if, would people accept Pat Parfrey, who's the Deputy Minister of Health and Community Services at this moment in time, co-chair of the Health Accord, what about him as the Minister responsible? Because if there's anybody out there who's been working hard on the actual operations of what the future looks like of healthcare, Dr. Parfrey's one. And now I know he's not elected, but for me, and now that's the politics of it all, I just want the best we can get in the various portfolios. And I know it's absolutely should indeed be starting with folks who are elected by their constituents. But what do you think as Parfrey as the interim minister? He'll kill me for even throwing his name in there. But
I think that's a good idea. I think you're onto something there, and it's very simple to put it in place. And you mentioned the example of Miss Manning and her appointment, and of course it is tradition and precedent in our parliamentary system that if you appoint somebody from outside to a cabinet position, then that person should run for a seat in the House of Assembly at the first available opportunity. So, you know, if Pat Parfrey wanted to take on the job, and you're right, he's more than well qualified and able to do the job, and he wanted to take it on and run for a seat. I mean, there's a seat coming up pretty soon in Waterford Valley, replacing the old Minister of Health, Tom Osborne. So, yeah, you got a good idea.
Yeah, and now, of course, Parfrey will kill me for even putting his name out there.
I know he will. You're in trouble.
And so be it. I've been in trouble for a long time now. Doc, appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
Yeah. Okay, take care, Paddy.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
All right, let's take that break. And, of course, just a gentle reminder that if you're sitting on something that is a concern of yours, but you're not sure if it reached the threshold of worthiness to call the show, let me reassure you, it does. So whatever you want to talk about, we can do it after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. In reference to one of the comments coming from Dennis O'Keefe regarding some 15 groups that maybe all did put forward an appeal about world energy, someone sent an email during the the break there, saying that they also wrote an appeal to the federal minister responsible, Stephen Guilbeault. Now, I did make some comments yesterday about when Stephen Guilbeault was here and joins Joanne Thompson about an announcement for what might be sometime in the future, who knows where, why, or when, but a national urban park, and of course his role as a member of Greenpeace and what that meant for the sealing industry here. Some people thought that was possibly untoward for me to mention it, but that's the fact of the matter. You know, people's background, who they are, what they've done in the past as part of their, their present, or the present. So anyway, I brought it up. Someone was quite disgusted with that, but so be it. But this person said they also wrote an appeal to the federal minister. Now, the federal government has been really quite clear on this one, and we've asked them directly a couple of times as to why there wasn't consideration for the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada to also have a look at these wind to hydrogen to ammonia projects. They said quite clearly it's not in their purview, but how can that possibly be? Because if we have things like joint management in the oil industry, why wouldn't it be our sole responsibility to make these evaluations as opposed to have to rely on the federal government for the final green light? But apparently they tell us it's simply not required. All right. There is going to be some involvement of the federal government, though, when we talk about the possibility for offshore wind, because that's coming. The amendment to the Atlantic Accord is in the hands of the Senate right now, and so once it passes through there, it will indeed open the door for the potential offshore wind proposals to be applied for here at the provincial level. And again, when it's the Atlantic Accord involved, there will be federal government involvement in final approvals and assessments. So they've kind of I guess they've just sort of told us that because of whatever, that they don't have any role here in the onshore wind. But what would have happened if the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada had to be part of this conversation is there would indeed been opportunities for some of these 15 groups to apply for intervener status, which comes with some support. Because when you're just an ordinary citizen that has any layer or level of concern, it might not come with the type of expertise required to get involved with water management, hydrolysis, might not come with the actual professional background in noise monitoring or some of the other concerns that people have. And not to say that if you don't have the academic background to support your concern, that's not the point. The point is that many of these groups have said out loud that they'd love to have their so-called experts brought in to be interveners and the money that comes with it. So the federal government has pretty much just shirked the responsibility on that one. Whether or not you think that's a good or a bad idea, you can offer your opinion here on the show. Also via email, being asked what I said about the Canadian Transportation Agency. So apparently, what's going on here, inside the backlog of 72,000, amendments have been made to the Canada Transportation Act that says the regulator, quote, can decide to keep confidential any part of an order except for several key parts of the ruling, such as flight number, date, and whether a delay was within the carrier's control at the request of the complainant or the airline. Goes on to say in an email from a spokesman from the CTA, Giardino Huot pointed to the legislation and emphasized that rulings by complaint resolution officers must not be published unless all parties agree to it. So basically, the Canadian Transportation Agency, by law, can take you to task if you post publicly the findings of a ruling, which makes absolutely, literally no sense. Because are they not trying to evaluate whether or not something was done fairly with people who have legitimate concerns, have had travel disrupted? So it kind of gives me the feeling, and I use the word black hole and in a vacuum, because that's exactly what it is. As an individual, I'll understand the outcome of the ruling, but I can't let people know on public platforms. It's pretty heavy-handed stuff. How and why should that be anything even available to the government to amend the Canada Transportation Act? Because that is absolute nonsense. We know the industry is in a bit of disarray, and we know that a lot of things, whether it be the lack of protections for the airline passengers and or how it's enforced and how people are informed about what their rights are, then the backlog and the timeliness for getting your evaluation or your complaint adjudicated, and then it's all the continued problems with scheduling and staffing. And the backlog at the CTA is only going to get worse. All right? When the WestJet mechanics were on strike and all of those planes were parked and all those passengers were displaced, you know full well that there's going to be another 10, 12, 15,000 complaints on top of the 72 that are already in place. All right, let's check in on Twitter before we get to the news. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, plenty of time for you to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. Ruby, you're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
I'm well, thank you. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. Listen, Patty, I'm calling on a concerning subject that I can't fathom. I'm talking about our youth coming out of schools, grade 10 and 11. I have a couple of nieces and also a few friends, and they're very intelligent people, and they're after going almost everywhere to get a job I'm talking about St. John's. And everywhere they go to the big box stores, and they were told they couldn't hire these people. Now, this is why I'm calling, because I haven't heard it. They have a grant to hire other people. Now, these people are looking for employment so they can go and get their books and so on for the following year. Now, I'm calling you, Patty, to see if you have did you hear anything about this subject, because it's a very concerning subject, and I haven't heard anything on your program.
I'm not exactly sure what the question is. Are you asking me if there's something like a summer job grant program?
Usually they're looking, because they're getting ready to go back to grade 12.
Oh, yeah.
And they went to different stores, and they've been looking ever since they've gotten out of school. And what they're told, they can't get a job at, say, your big box store.
Yep.
And they cannot get jobs at different restaurants because there's a grant out, which I didn't even know. It's a punch in the stomach for me to hear this. and that they were hired. They were told that they had a grant to hire people. Now, these people are Newfoundlanders, so I was just wondering. I got no prejudice against anyone, but I'd love to see some of our own people get some of the jobs that's out there on the market.
So, fair enough. There's tons of different programs that you might be referring to. There's a generic Canada Summer Jobs wage subsidy targeted at people between the ages of 15 and 30. So that is a thing, but that's been a thing for a long, long time. You might be talking about temporary foreign workers, I assume, right?
Well, no, I'm not talking about temporary foreign workers. I'm talking about people I would like for you to get the minister on, Jerry Byrne, and explain what's going ahead in this province, that our young people can't even. I'm not going to go any further. Our young people can't get a job here. I mean, if you think, I mean, they were told that the government has given those stores grants to pay them, so they hire other people.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a provincial issue.
I can't believe that this is going ahead.
Well, there's a couple of things here. So if, for instance, a company is, quote-unquote, unable to find people to take a job where they are, then they can't apply to the federal government for temporary foreign workers. The problem with that would be is that some companies are abusing it. And I asked Minister Byrne directly on that issue.
Yeah, excuse me, Patty, just a minute, and I speak up here, because this has been going on quite a while. And, I mean, if we're going to let this, I mean, I'm an 81-year-old, and I'm speaking not only for my nieces, I'm speaking for our youths coming up here in this province. Is this the way we're going to treat our people? This is ridiculous. Our young people wants a bit of work too.
Right.
You know.
Okay, so I'll finish my thought.
Is there any way you can get this checked out further? Because, I mean, if I got to get a banner and get another few people to go to the Confederation building or go anywhere, there's time for the people of this province to stand up and find out what in the hell is going on in this province. It
depends what the question is, though. That's what I'm trying to get to here, Ruby, because there are different programs in place. The temporary foreign worker program is maybe one that some of these companies might be referring to. Now, for things like box stores, I'll be surprised because they're not the same jobs as, say, for instance, working in a fast food restaurant or in a fish plant or what have you.
No.
So the problem with the temporary foreign worker program is it can indeed be abused, and that's a problem. I mean, we've heard from people, and I've asked... I've asked the minister this directly in the past, and I'm happy to do it again. It's his responsibility, just let me finish. It's his responsibility that if it's been identified that a local has been let go and replaced with someone on the temporary foreign worker program, it's his responsibility to flag that and bring it to the federal minister's attention, because that's not what it's intended to do. Now, legitimately, some people are unable to find people to take jobs, and they will indeed bring in temporary foreign workers.
I understand all that. Quite understandable. That's understandable.
Right. But this is not just an issue here. I'll give you some numbers from June, and these are the StatsCan job numbers. We know the country shed 1,400 jobs in June. Here's where it gets even more problematic. Youth unemployment rate in June was particularly painful for people ages 15 to 24. It went up almost a full percentage point. It's 13.5% unemployment for that age group last month. That's a big number. It's the highest rate since September of 2014. You know, back out some pandemic years because they don't necessarily really count. So this is a problem for young people across the country.
It's awful because what I'm hearing here in this province is it's giving the young people. All I hear is our young people are too lazy to work. Now, when I hear this, and I heard this from people this past month or so, how they can't get jobs. That's cruel to hear. That are young people, which is a false statement altogether, right?
Yeah, I mean, my youngsters worked when they were young teens, right through.
Yes.
Now, there is also an argument here. Like, if we were talking about immigrants, because that's what I'll inevitably hear is, you know, immigrants are here taking my job. The fact of the matter is,
I'm not saying
I didn't say that you said that.
Job.
I didn't say that you said that.
I'm just stating a fact that should be ratified.
Right. So when we talk about the presence of immigrants and jobs and what have you, you know, we can't have it both ways. If people are talking about immigration and the pressure puts on housing, the pressure puts on healthcare, what we also all hope is that we have immigrants who come and work as opposed to rely on government services. So if an immigrant has a job, that's a problem for some, but when you stand back and think about it, we really do want people that come to the country to actually work. So that creates that double-edged sword, right, about what's good, what's bad, who gets a job.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent, Patty. But when we got all these people coming from, I'm not saying for every province or every country in the world here, and you're discriminating against and not hiring our own people that were born and raised here in Newfoundland and Labrador. I mean, well, you must be trying to get rid of all our young people and just that's it with our province. Because what I'm after hearing here this past couple of months, something needs to be done with this topic.
Happy to have the minister back on to talk about exactly that. Not a problem.
I would appreciate, or any other form of any other party, any other NDP, PC, any other party needs to step up, because our young people are the people of the future here in this province.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, Patty, thank you, and have a good day.
You too, Ruby. All the best. Right, bye-bye. I mean, those are the numbers from across the country in June. So just to bring it a step further. So the employment rate amongst returning students looking for a summer job before going back to school full-time in the fall, it fell to 46.8%. For context, that rate is the lowest since June of 1998. So we've got ourselves a particularly poor job market potential for people between the ages of 15 and 24. That's how they measure those particular youth numbers. We can extrapolate a little further when we talk about the Canada Summer Job Grant, and that's a wage subsidy that extends all the way from 15 to 30. But the numbers for the youth in the country looking for jobs has been particularly woeful in June. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Gail. You're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, Gail. How you doing?
Hi. I'm calling about the pedestrian mall. Myself and my two sisters were down there on Tuesday. And, of course, Tuesday they had a 4,000 passenger Norwegian Star cruise ship in there. Beautiful cruise ship, big and everything else. And we walked from the beginning to the end of it and back. So we went down to have a look at the cruise ship and down Bears Cove, I think the name of the street is. And when we got down to the bottom of it, on the right-hand side, there's police horses were, of course, down there that day. There was nothing but manure all on the one side of the street where you go into the parking area. And, I mean, big chunks of horse manure there. Now, everybody was there with the dogs, and I mean, they all had their dog bags there to pick up poop wherever, the dog went to. But yet all this was there, and there was people from the cruise ship walking up and down that street. And, of course, it was right in front, like I said, where they were parking. So can you imagine being parked in there or going in there and running over that and bringing it all the way across the city? Would you?
I saw it, as a matter of fact. I know exactly what you're talking about. If we are obliging dog owners to carry around bags to clean up after their dog, which they should, and that's the right thing to do, then absolutely. I mean, the horses can indeed be ambassadors, and people like to see the big police horses, but someone should be directly behind them and pick up their manure, pick up the droppings right away. It can't be piled up against a wall of Beards Cove or anywhere else down there. So, yeah, it's nice to see the horses out, but there should be either the responsibility for the security at the pedestrian mall or someone working for the RNC or someone hired to do exactly that, clean up after the horse. That only makes sense. It's pretty gross.
Yeah, it is. And even on the pedestrian mall itself, on Water Street itself, there was a few droppings.
Yep.
I mean, you got kids walking down there. You got animals walking down there. I mean, I take my dog out for a walk, and my husband do, and he takes his bag with him, for wherever the dog is. But they used 2 years ago, as far as I know, had this kind of bag behind the dog.
They used to. Behind the horse, yeah.
Yeah. And behind the horse, yes. But I don't understand why they didn't this day. I mean, you got this pet these passengers coming in and seeing that, you know? And I was just thinking, I wouldn't want my car in that and drive that and have all that, you know, underneath my car either.
Of course not. No, you're 100% right. The horses should be cleaned up after immediately.
Yeah, well, that's what I called for today, because I thought it very disgusting and very, you know, you say yes, you get to your dogs, and then you have two great big horses, and they're leaving it everywhere.
Yep. And when I saw it, there was no shortage of flies.
No. And like you said, it's nice for the horses to be down there and showing the passengers and everything. But 4,000 newcomers to Newfoundland, you know, and see this on the main road of a city, I mean, I thought it was disgusting.
I'm not going to argue that point whatsoever. I think you're 100% right.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Patty.
Thanks, Gail. Appreciate the time.
Okay.
Yeah, so whether it be something to capture from the source on the horse or legitimately, I mean, we know what the horses are going to do, right? So someone should be involved following the horses and cleaning up after them. It's not that complicated. Anyway, let's take a break. When we come back, we know the town of CBS is working on a vision for their town into the future. The mayor of the community is Darren Bent. He's right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the mayor of CBS. That's Darren Bent. Mayor Bent, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir. A beautiful day here in Conception Bay South.
Always is. God's country, nice and gray in town. All right.
We're going to have a great day. We're getting ready to finish off our Calagruce Soiree events today and tomorrow. And we're going to have the Clara Nolan's barbecue coming up now at lunch at the Legion. And tomorrow night, the last blast on Topsail Beach, which is a great event. Bands playing, and we invite the community and guests to our town to come out and enjoy a great evening to cool up the Calagruce Soiree tomorrow evening.
The legendary garden party that it is. Fantastic. Let's get into the plan for your community. So just give us an understanding about, you talk about long-term vision. Over what sort of time frame are we talking long-term?
Yeah, so these municipal plans are typically 10 years in length. Our last official one was approved in 2011, so we're a little bit behind the timeline, and much of that was to do with COVID. We had started the work prior to COVID, and then, of course, everything come to a grinding halt because we can't do the engagement and getting people involved that we need to and we want to hear from. So we last fall in our budget for this year, we made it a priority to get the municipal plan clued up and off to the provincial government for approval this year, and to go forward for another 10 years approximately.
So, the community is growing, has been growing, continues to grow. So does that mean that the primary focus would be starting with housing?
Yeah, so housing is just one of the things, because everybody's talking about housing these days, Patty, but you can't talk about housing in isolation. You have to talk as well about environment protection, agriculture, heritage culture, parks, recreation. It's all part of the housing, initiatives that we've seen. But housing is one of the key things. We have so many people in Conception Bay South, and I'll say this, especially seniors, not only seniors, but especially seniors who have been live-years. They've been here their whole lives. They want to downsize. They want to get into a smaller, more economical unit if they can, but yet the availability is extremely low. It's very difficult for them to find it here. So in the municipal plan, we have some initiatives that we want to encourage, multi-units. We want to encourage duplex, triplex, quadplex going forward for developers. Even in our last budget, we removed a number of fees for any developer that is putting in multi-unit and or including like apartments within the home and so forth. So housing is a big thing, but we have to keep in mind that it can't be housing at all costs because, we have to protect the environment. We want to ensure that the agricultural heritage of our town is maintained in some fashion. And, of course, we're in doing that and in promoting the housing, we're also encouraging, a hobby farm, backyard farming, and that sort of thing. So it's all part and parcel of the same thing. And, we're a residential community primarily, Patty. So we are going to see quite a bit of growth we expect over the next year or two, as interest rates now are starting to come down a little bit, and seems to be the trend. Initiatives by the federal and provincial government and the town to encourage housing. We expect many of the projects that we have in the hopper right now, pretty well approved and ready to go, to get going. And thankfully, because it's the trend of developers, they're in this to make money, but also they're providing housing. And one of the things that they've realized is they have to do these multiplexes. They have to do, housing that has apartments and maybe allowing for a second income to offset the huge cost of just getting any house these days. So the municipal plan is really to keep up with what's actually happening and try to predict a little bit into the future.
Well, multiplexes and apartments and what have you, of course, attractive for the developers now that the tax has been backed off. The trick there would be for not only the developer to want to build, but to be able to hit the affordability target, because it's one thing to build something, quite another for me to be able to afford to buy it or to rent it. But what do you say to people who are, you talked about liviers who've been in the community their entire life? Because now what we're talking about, when we talk about backyard suites and multiplexes, smaller lots, we're talking about population density. We're talking about neighborhoods changing the way they look and feel today. And that will be a concern for some, because we'll get to green spaces and flood management and what have you. But the feel and the nature of neighborhoods is going to change. It's going to change here in the city of St. John's as well. Lots of money out there inside the Housing Accelerator Fund, and there's another fund that's come to pass in the most recent federal budget. So what do you say to folks who think, I don't want my neighborhood to change? Because inevitably it probably will.
Yeah. So I know there are those who would like to freeze time and things to stay the way they are. But Patty, tell me what community, what neighborhood, anywhere hasn't changed in the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years? They're all changing. We're not stopping change. We're not saying, no, you can't live in Conception Bay South. We're not saying to developers, no, you can't build in Conception Bay South. It's our job to make sure that it's done responsibly, and we don't believe that there's the feel of our community is going to be lost going forward. There are some things in the proposed draft, and let's be clear, this is not an approved document. This is something that's still out in the public. We're still seeking feedback from the public on a number of things. We've hired a consulting firm, Uplands, and what they've done is they've put in some things that seem to be the trend in municipalities of our size, across the country, and probably more so in Atlantic Canada, to increase, the opportunities for people to find smaller housing. It doesn't mean it's something that council is going to approve if the public seems to be, not for it. So, we're putting these things out there. It's prudent to do so because we want people to have their say. We want to show people where things tend to be going. And if it's not for Conception Bay South, then it's not for Conception Bay South. But subdivisions are going to be built. The community is growing, and it's going to continue to grow. It's our job to make sure it's grown responsibly, that it protects open space areas, that it protects the environment, and it allows people to be able to stay in their homes. And look, the biggest, it's not a scam word, but affordable housing is a real difficult thing for me to choke out, because it's what's affordable, and it depends on your market, I suppose. But to me, to be able to buy a new home, a small new home on a decent piece of land for $320,000 plus doesn't seem real affordable. So one of the things that we're hoping that will happen over the next little while, and we do have one in the hopper now, is an apartment building where there's going to be 65 new units for people to rent an apartment. We're seeing people, look at having the multiplexes, but the multiplexes tend to still be up in the $300,000 range. So, people selling their homes and their properties that they've held on to their entire lives will probably get dollar for dollar on what they're buying and what they're selling because of the value of properties in most cases, but not in all cases. So it is a real challenge, Patty. But when it comes to the feel of Conception Bay South, we have a beautiful community here. We want to protect that. But we also want to acknowledge that there's a great number of people that want to call Conception Bay South home, and they aspire to do that, and we want to make that as easy and as responsible as possible.
So you talk about there will be new subdivisions, what have you. How do you strike this balance? Because I think that's been a problem here in the city of St. John's particularly, is urban sprawl. Because it's one thing to build out versus build up, but building out comes with additional cost, water and sewer and sidewalks and ploughing and all the rest of it. So how do you speak to striking that balance? Because it sounds great when we're talking about not changing the feature of neighborhoods too drastically or dramatically, but building out is a really costly venture. And I think we've done a poor job of that in this city. That's just my own personal position. So talk about that balance.
Yeah, so you're talking about whether you're putting in too much infrastructure that you can't maintain over time. And so some of the things that we're looking at in the draft documents, is requiring new subdivision developers to be on a basis of full sewer and water servicing. That's a possibility. We want to clarify their responsibility for servicing extensions. So developers are putting in extensions to roads. Are they responsible for the space they want to leave in between? Of course, I think we want to continue to see that, and we want to align like the roads. And one of the things that has been proposed is a little narrower roads in the new subdivisions, reducing the pavement width, allowing for maybe a little smaller street front lot, and allowing the developer to put in more houses in a smaller area. And that would accommodate, of course, the request or the requirement that we have especially from our seniors, for smaller lots and smaller housing, so that they don't have as much to maintain and look after. And these are the sorts of things that we look at. Urban sprawl, you can see it in many areas. Conception Bay South is an area that has seen a little bit of this in some areas, but where we're seeing right now about 400 new homes in the hopper, the developers are just getting ready to go with. Some of it is in our downtown area, and some of it is in our a hugely underdeveloped area. We've seen a few subdivisions already, and what tends to be happening is that developers are coming along now and kind of filling in spaces that haven't been developed. We have a large area in our community that we're opening up with water and sewer installations. We're getting prepared now, hopefully, over the next 3 or 4 years, to launch a water and sewer project in the Seal Cove area, and for people in that area, the liveers, that'll be great for them. But once you put the water and sewer in, of course, you're opening up new areas for development, of course. And one of the things that's unique, I think, on the Northeast Avalon to Conception Bay South is we have some beautiful areas that maintaining the integrity of the community and building it within the landscape that already exists, ensuring that we have open space, ensuring that we're environmentally protecting areas. We're making sure water management is proper, something that the developer would have to do, is key to what we're doing going forward. And I think that managing it in a sort of, a more of a forward-thinking way, so that we can try to see 10 years down the road. But you know what? 10 years ago, there weren't too many people screaming about housing. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, that seems to be all people are talking about. So it's hard to predict the future, that's for sure.
Yeah, in the world of water management, there's a couple of residents have been quoted in the news story, talking about things like this. We should be moving more trees in. They're already come in when they do a development, take all the trees out, and they put one tree back per lot. So some of the concern with, when we deforest or devegetate an area, and I'm looking across at Kenmount Terrace every morning, and that pops into my mind every time I look out the window, is a water management issue, whether it be the protection of bogs and for trees and for local vegetation to be maintained in an effort to protect people from the flow of water and the loss of green space. What do you say to those two particular women who chimed in on that issue?
Yeah, no, and I heard that, and I responded on another media regarding that. But I don't mind saying that the town has spent quite a bit of money and quite a bit of time with regards to water management over the past while. And even this year, we're spending $200,000 initiating a stormwater management study for the Kelligrews River. And I think, Patty, you know that the Kelligrews River is an absolutely important environmental piece of our town that we want to protect and make sure that we understand the flooding possibilities with development anywhere near that river going forward. And it's something that we're very proud to be able to do now. And if you could go back in time, the best time to do it would have been 20 years ago, of course. But here we are. We also have done assessments on our town, and we've identified what we call moderate geological hazard vulnerability areas where we control the development within those areas. And we've also done some things to enhance our coastline, which is extremely important. And when it comes to installing streets, curb and gutter is an absolute essential for doing bigger, newer streets. And people may think, it's curb and gutter, it's for the sidewalks and all that. It's not. It's to control the water flow, to make sure it's going to the appropriate areas so that it is not harming other areas or harming new developments or even developments that have been there for a long, long time. And we've also looked at putting in some stricter uses for developers in managing water, and it's, in doing water studies to ensure that you're not causing any trouble. They're also required to look at capacity in the area before developments happen as well. The capacity has to be there before you start building. And look, I know the concerns of the folks you're talking about, and we heard them at our meetings, and we greatly appreciate their input. Of course, Karen is with KEEP and has been for a long time, and we've listened to her. And one of the things that we're very proud of is that we have implemented a environmental lens on all of our development decisions. This is a policy that we brought in just shortly after the last election, and we did that because we believe it is absolutely imperative to do that. I met with Karen just before I ran for mayor and wanted to get the feel of what she was saying and where KEEP was in its concerns with the environment. And I think always people that are keen to that, and the municipality with its responsibility, has to keep that lens on at all times. And we should always have people that are holding our feet to the fire as a municipality to ensure that we are doing that, because these things, sometimes happen quickly, and you don't want to miss on these. These are not the things you want to get wrong. And of course, we are very pleased with what's happened since we brought in that policy, and our staff know that. And in fact, we have a coastal stabilization plan that we've done, a study that we've done. There's outlined a lot of work that needs to be done between Long Pond and the east end of town. And we continue to monitor that, and we'll continue to put money towards that as much as we can over the next few years as well.
Appreciate the time this morning, Mayor Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Darren Bent is the mayor of CBS. Let's take a break. When we go back, there's a caller there who wants to respond to Ruby, and that's about youth and the difficulty in finding a summer job. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning.
Just wanted to say I'm enjoying your show. I listen to it every day.
Thank you very much.
But I called to say I do agree with Ruby. We have children, young adults out here that cannot get work. And they're simply told, no, we're not hiring. To find out next week, they've hired hands 3, 4, 5, whatever. But where's our children? Home in the garden. There is no work for our children. And I think that's very unfair. And I agree, Jerry Byrne better check his stats, because he should do statistics on our youth in Newfoundland. There is no work out here for our children. None.
And I don't know really what...
cruel, but I know people are putting applications in, and I've heard the same comments. Oh, our children are lazy. They don't want to work. We can't get them to work. Give them a chance. They're not all alike. You got good children out here, and yes, you may have children that don't want to work, but our good is being destroyed because they're not given the opportunity to prove themselves.
I don't know what the job vacancy looks like out there. I do know that a family friend of ours, and the young fella, I believe, is 17. He's 17 or 18. And he's only willing to take certain kind of job, and so be it. That's up to him and his family. Like, I have no opinion on it. But there's some jobs that people just don't want. And I get that too, right? Like, I'm not a big fan of being in a fast food restaurant, even though both of my young fellas went at it there for a stretch. But I don't know if there's no jobs or people don't want certain types of jobs. But I do know right across the country, the youth unemployment rate is at the highest level it's been since June 1998, which is a massive problem. That's counting youth 15 to 24 years of age. So there's still some questions to be asked, right? Like, if a local company is not hiring locals because they can get a subsidized temporary foreign worker, that's a problem. That's not what the program is intended to do. And if people are doing that, they need to be flagged by the provincial minister and reported to the federal minister, number one. Secondly, if it's simply the matter of a company willing to hire someone from wherever, from Ukraine or Syria or the States or Ireland or Germany or England, and they simply hire an immigrant because of the sake of, well, there's a couple of things there. We want people who are newcomers to the country to actually work. So
that's right. I agree with you.
If they're not getting subsidized, then that's up to the individual employer. But if we have abuse of the temporary foreign worker program, that is a problem, and it should not be allowed to stand.
Well, I can assure you there is abuse of that out here. We got companies that hire 90% of foreigners.
Now, once again, if they're hiring people from outside or newcomers to the country, and it's not on some subsidized program, well, that's up to them. But if they are hiring...
This is subsidized.
Oh, it could very well be. And I asked Jerry Byrne directly that question live on this program. Is it his responsibility that if and when these issues are reported, that he has to do something about it? He said yes, and that's part of his job. So if people have actual examples of how that program is being abused, go directly to the minister and make sure that Jerry Byrne, or whoever's responsible, in addition to Minister Byrne, follows up and does the right thing, because we cannot have that program abused. Number one, because it's completely unfair, and number two, it just further complicates the conversation we have about immigration in the first place. Then all of a sudden, every immigrant is bad, every immigrant has been hired under false circumstances, when of course that's not the truth. So we've got to get it right. The program is set up for a specific reason. If it's not being handled appropriately, let's do something about it. Okay.
But Jerry Byrne needs to come out and have a look at it, because I can assure you it's being taken advantage of out here. 100%.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think, fair-minded people will agree. There's lots of different complicated moving parts here in the conversation, but number one, let's just lean on this one. The temporary foreign worker program is for a reason. If it's not being applied for the proper reasons, then let's deal with it.
I agree with you 100%.
I appreciate making time for the show, and thanks for tuning in.
All right, then.
You take care.
You. Have a good day.
You
Bye
too.
now.
Bye-bye. All right, this is based on a conversation we had with Gail, who was talking about the concern regarding horse manure, particularly around the pedestrian wall. This is directly from the RNC. Mounted officers, upon returning to the barn after patrol, will track their route and clean up what they can. They can't while on patrol, and it may sit for a few hours while they patrol. You can contact the 311 for the city, who will clean up if informed, as the city was pro-mounted unit patrol for the deterrence of bad actors. So, fair enough. If that's the responsibility to backtrack the route that they travel and clean up after the fact, I think when we have issues like the pedestrian wall, for instance, that maybe, just maybe, if the city is pro-mounted unit and they can be made aware, and of course I'm sure people did make them aware via 311, then of course the officers can't hop off the horse every time that the horse does its business, but cleaning up quicker would probably be helpful in settings like that. What do you think? Let's take a break. When we come back, we're talking wind energy. Don't go away. And welcome back to the program. Let's go. Oh, just before we go. So I just heard a commercial from the Association for New Canadians regarding temporary foreign workers, and they have the same workplace rights as Canadians. Absolutely. Just throw this out there for your consideration. If there's a company that is not using the temporary foreign worker program appropriately, let's put the blame and the focus on the employer, not on the worker. Because if people just want to work, then of course it's not their fault that the employer might be using some loopholes or abusing the program. So let's point the finger of blame where it belongs, at the person, the employer, who's abusing a program, not the person who simply wants a job. Let's go ahead and go to line number 2, say good morning to the Conservative member for Costa Bay, Central Notre Dame. That's Clifford Small. Good morning, Cliff. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How do you hear me?
It's a bit hollow.
Bit hollow?
Yeah.
1 second. Yes, Paddy, I heard you mention wind energy in the offshore, and of course we had Bill C-49 before committee for a few weeks back in March, and we heard numerous concerns raised by fishing industry interest, even from the United States, where they've got experience now with wind energy in their ocean. And we tried to get some amendments to make sure that the fishing industry would have their voices heard and listened to, but we couldn't get those amendments through. The Liberal Party blocked every single one of them. Even amendments that were pushed by the FFAW, Unifor, were blocked and voted down by the NDP, in fact. So, Patty, it's very concerning that we have this emerging industry very near at hand, and we don't have the proper means to address concerns that fishing industry stakeholders and, in fact, recreational boaters may have. So I just called in to let your listeners know that this is very big on my radar and on the radar of the Conservative Party to make sure that wind energy in the offshore is done properly.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to get out in front of this conversation because as of now, 0 applications for offshore wind. We don't know where it might be, to what magnitude or scope or scale it might be. So, of course, I think everyone would agree, regardless of which party you want to support, that doing things like that right and with the appropriate consultations has to be the process. I mean, there will be concerns with the fishery. There will be some concerns with recreational access and recreational traditional routes, but that doesn't mean that it cannot be done, because wind farms are not new. They're not new off different countries' shores, but I don't think anyone's going to argue your summary point that we got to do it right. Sure, of course.
That's right, Patty. But what comes up continuously is that wind energy is working in other countries in the offshore, and that the fishing industry has very few concerns. But if you actually study, if you dig in, you find out that the opposition to offshore wind and fishing industry throughout Europe and down the eastern seaboard of the United States is immense. And I mentioned on your show a while back that Lloyd's of London won't insure vessels that want to navigate through wind farms. So, you know, the powers that be may say, oh, you'll be able to fish lobster, you'll be able to fish crab, you'll be able to use hook and line or gill nets or seine or whatever amongst wind farms. Now, the government may allow it, but when Lloyd's of London says you can't go within a couple of miles of a wind farm, then that's a whole different story. And it'll even affect recreational boaters, like people with sailboats and whatnot. So it's going to have vast implications for people to want to either enjoy some time recreationally or in fact make a living. And the thing is, the wind farms in the ocean predominantly want to place their structures on the banks or on the shelves in the shallower water. So the competition for the same spatial use in the ocean is going to be a huge concern, and Bill C-49 completely fails to address that.
Well, of course, the proponents, they can want what they want. Doesn't mean they get it.
Well, true enough. But, you know, when the time comes, and it will come, because Canada is the only country in the Northwest Atlantic. I guess maybe Iceland may not have them, but they're all over Europe and down the eastern seaboard. And the impact on the fishing industry has been severe. And even in terms of search and rescue, can't operate within a certain distance of a wind farm. And there were lives lost near Rhode Island a couple of years ago. The search and rescue craft couldn't even the helicopter couldn't get close enough to rescue fishermen that were in peril. So there's a lot of concerns here, and we just can't let this happen in our fishing areas. There are areas that very little fishing takes place in, and of course that might work fine. But the thing is, wind energy proponents are going to want to put them on prime fishing ground.
And again, that doesn't mean we have to let them. Iceland, as a matter of fact, Cliff is moving towards a 10 gigawatt offshore wind farm. No, they have no turbines onshore, but moving towards 10 gigs offshore.
And Paddy, I'm sure if you did a little research, you wouldn't have to dig very far to find out that the fishing industry in Iceland is completely opposed to that. It's not the story that the public hears. You don't see the full picture. But I tell you, if you go online and you look at pictures of wind farms in the ocean, you will not see the picture of a wind farm with a fishing vessel operating in it. There are no vessels amongst those turbines, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself, and you can concur.
Of course. And as a matter of fact, we have broached this exact issue when talking about C49. We had Katie Power on from the FFAW. That's her role, and she's been involved in some of these consultations about the possibility for offshore wind. So we actually have covered this several times.
So right now the bill is in the Senate, and it's. I think there are a couple of committee meetings left in the Senate. We're hoping that our Newfoundland and Labrador senators can get some meaningful amendments, and we get it back to Parliament in a revised form, and that the concerns of the fishing industry, recreational boaters, and whatnot will be addressed in a revised form, and hopefully witnesses' testimony gets strong consideration in the Senate. So that's the last chance before then the Newfoundland government, of course, has to deal with that bill in the House of Assembly.
Sure. So very specifically, you want amendments talking about proximity of wind farms to fishing grounds, proximity of wind farms to the shore. Is that the basics of what you want to see amended?
Well, these things start out as areas of interest, AOIs. So first of all, there's an AOI. The next thing, then with respect to marine protected areas, that's how it starts out, and it'll start out the same way with wind farms, hopefully. But the experience with marine protected areas is that the fishing industry is invited to the table at the second stage, and then they're told that, oh yes, you'll be able to use hook and line, you'll be able to use lobster pots, you'll be able to fish in these areas, and then when the marine protected area is rolled out, in a lot of cases, it doesn't come out as promised, and fishing is banned in 90% of marine protected areas. So that's what we're concerned about with wind energy, and we want the fishing industry to be able to work very closely and help determine where these wind projects are going to go, and that their voices are heard, and that if they're going to place these things on prime fishing grounds, that there's a compensation formula for the loss of livelihoods that's going to take place. So hopefully some of these things will be addressed in the Senate, and that the proper amendments are made, and then when it comes back to the House, the bill can get passed with amendments that ensure the viability of our fishing industry, because we've relied on it in this province for over 400 years, and it's something that's reliable. It's a green energy, a green industry. It needs to remain sustainable, Paddy. It can't be jeopardized by offshore wind.
Right, and on that point, just disagree with one thing you said there, and that's compensation packages. Because if we're talking about long-term sustainability and viability, if part of the fishing grounds are lost for today's enterprise owner, that's one thing, and the compensation for that person is one thing, but then that fishing ground is compromised for the long term. So long after that fish harvester is gone, there won't be one coming behind it because of the compromised fishing ground. So I know exactly the point you're making, but if we should disallow these particular projects to be in the prime fishing grounds, then we should disallow them, period. As opposed to, okay, well, you can put your turbines there and I'll pay the shrimp harvesters on the southwest coast, because that doesn't look 10, 15, 20 years down the road at those continued shrimping grounds. Very quickly before I have to get to the news, do you prefer Cliff or Clifford?
Either.
Okay. Cliff, any comments on the DFO decision to reopen a commercial cod fishery? Not sitting well with an awful lot of people here. The FFAW.
They're pretty vocal about their disdain for this decision. Your thoughts?
Paddy, the federal minister broke their promise on the 115,000 tons to have priority for the inshore, but the biggest thing about it is that now it's a commercial fishery. I agree with the FFAW that it should not have become a commercial fishery. They could have went to 25 or 30,000 tons as a stewardship fishery. There would come a point where NAFO countries would say, hey, this is a large-scale commercial fishery, in the guise of an experimental scientific fishery or whatever, and there'd be a fight on the world stage, and that's one that Canada needs to have. But to give foreigners access when there was a petition put forward, signed by nearly 4,000 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and folks from all across Canada, to allow a few more days of the recreational fishery, to now come in and give foreigners 950,000 tons of fish that our own folks right here can't go out, where they can't go out and at least for a certain period of the recreational season have the fishery open for every day of the week. It's completely disgusting, Paddy.
It's certainly not sitting well. I am late for the news, but I appreciate the time, Cliff. Thanks for the call. And
one other thing there, Paddy, I'm going to be pushing for some emergency meetings at the Standing Committee for Fisheries and Oceans to address this. I don't expect much from the minister. She's very stubborn. She's been stubborn on redfish. She's been stubborn on mackerel, where we had an emergency meeting to address the closure of the mackerel fishery. And we're looking at schools of mackerel everywhere around the island now, and the large mackerel, and our fishermen are denied the opportunity to make a living from mackerel. DFO refuses to listen to people on the water, and that needs to end, and it will end under a Conservative government. There will create more opportunity for folks in our coastal regions to make a good living.
Appreciate the time this morning.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. As Cliff Small is a CPC member for Coastal Bay Central and North Dam. Let's take a break for the news. Don't go away.
Your voice in Newfoundland and Labrador's biggest conversation.
If you want to know what's happening in your province, tune in to Openline every day.
Have your say weekday morning starting at 9 a.m. on Openline with Paddy Daly on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the program. We talk a lot about mental health related issues, whether it be in your own individual lives or mental health access and supports in the workplace, but also the concept of mindfulness. Mindfulness in the Workplace, Cultivating Wellbeing at Work, is a book that's penned by Andrew Safer, and Andrew joins us on line number 1. Good morning, Andrew. You're on the air.
Hello, Paddy. Thank you very much.
Happy to have you on the show again. So let's start at the very, very beginning here, because I think some people might be confused with what exactly mindfulness means.
Mm-hmm. Mindfulness is having a present moment awareness. So we're relating to what's actually going on right now instead of thinking about the past or the future. And we're doing it non-judgmentally. So we're not sitting here deciding this is good, this is bad, I like this, I don't like this. But we're just seeing it as it is. So that's basically mindfulness.
How would it differ in trying to cultivate well-being at work versus, say, for instance, in your family time or in your spare time or in your quiet time?
Great question. As you know, Paddy, we all have stresses at work and pressures, and it's inevitable. It's not a problem, but it can become a problem depending on how we're dealing with it. So the stresses that we have at work, for example, we get overcommitted. We have certain files we're working on. We have other ones that become more important all of a sudden, as an example. And so we're getting squeezed. And being able to approach that situation in a different way instead of just reacting and being impulsive is what we're talking about. It's that we can actually take a mental step back, and we can allow a bit of space, and then we can see things more clearly when we're not just in a reactionary mode. That's an example.
So, pragmatically speaking, what does achieving better state of mindfulness at the workplace actually mean for me as an individual? Is it about my contentment? Is it about my productivity? Is it about my happiness? So what do I achieve by achieving better mindfulness?
Right. For one thing, we we end up that we're in more of a position of being in the driver's seat than the victim in situations. So that's very liberating, and it allows us, the room, like I said, to approach whatever the dynamics are, in a creative way. So I think everything that you mentioned, the productivity for sure. There have been studies about productivity and mindfulness, and that we're not being sort of hijacked by our own, let's say, emotionality and problems that we're having with what's going on. We're not being hijacked so much that we're able to acknowledge, these difficulties and so on. But like I say, not being the victim of it.
A clear mind is also a pretty key feature of your ability to problem solve. And, generally speaking, problems come big and small, but throughout the course of your business day, your professional day, there will be countless opportunities for you to have to solve problems, whether they be very fundamental about hooking up the right printer to your desktop versus big administrative issues or human resource issues or decisions based on business and contracts. So what is mindfulness relationship with problem solving?
Okay, another great question. There has been a fair bit of research done on problem solving in relation to mindfulness. We use the phrase beginner's mind. Beginner's mind, it's where we don't have an agenda. It's just right at the moment we don't have an agenda, which means that we're able to have an open mind and see what's going on. With problem solving, we tend to get very focused on the problem, and it's right in front of us. And a lot of times we end up with blinders, so we can't see the solution, right? So again, being able to take a break from the immediate constraints, and then that frees us up for some creative thinking.
It all makes perfect sense. So I guess this is obviously another very basic question, but what are some of the best practices in trying to achieve this? And what role does my management play? Because I can try to do it on my own, but unless the workplace is conducive to me being more mindful, then it'll probably be an uphill battle or a fish swimming upstream. So what's the best practices for achieving this as an individual and or a manager?
Yeah. So the key practice, it's a form of meditation. It's sitting meditation. It's not a woo-woo type of weird meditation. This has been adopted in large companies, Fortune 500 companies like Google, Intel, and so on. So, it's very down to earth, but it does involve, we're sitting in silence. We're able to observe the movement of our own mind. We have thoughts, feelings, emotions, impulses, and so on. And if we're not involved in an activity, we have the ability to see these things happening. So by becoming familiar with them, they don't control us nearly as much as they used to. And so that gives us, puts us in a really good position to handle whatever's coming up.
And for employers, and not to be callous, but if Fortune 500 companies have adopted this as a strategy in-house, not to be mean, but they're not doing it necessarily out of the goodness of their heart. They've seen what it means for productivity and profit and revenue streams and problem solving and content staff, that you don't have to suffer that big turnover. So they see the results on the business end. So obviously there's something to this.
Yeah, I think we should also mention relationships. Interpersonal relationships are improved, tend to be improved with a more mindful approach to communication, which involves, for example, being a good listener. And, in a company, if you've got people on different teams and they have to figure out how to coordinate and whatever, the communication can be a really important element of success, right? So it depends on how far you drill down on this. There are studies about both productivity and profit and so on. I haven't really explored them because that's not my main interest, but like you said, these are big companies, and they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't of some benefit to them.
Of course not.
Luckily, it's benefit to them, and it's also a benefit to the individuals.
So if that is not your prime focus, what would you suggest is your prime focus in this work?
I would say that well-being is my prime focus, and this has gotten more and more important, more valued, I guess, as the mental health challenges have increased, particularly since COVID. There have been, and the whole the workplace it's been totally changed in a lot of ways with remote works and so on. So mental health is absolutely key, and these companies that have mindfulness programs in-house are well aware of the importance of supporting the mental health of their employees. And this is one way. There are other things they're doing, but this is one way that they're supporting it.
Can it be achieved by everybody in the same fashion? Or if I have some sort of anxiety disorder that's been officially diagnosed, or I have, stresses that might be different, say, for instance, from Dave Williams, do we all take the same approach to achieving a better state of mindfulness, or is it different for different people?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I've worked with a lot of people suffering with anxiety issues because I have a program specifically for that. And I've seen it make a huge difference. But the key is that it makes a difference for people who are engaging with the training. So the training, I mentioned that sitting meditation is one. There's a walking practice as well. There are exercises, mindful eating, and so forth. And I've got these in this book, Mindfulness in the Workplace. So the ones that are actually doing these practices, they're engaging in them, are the ones who are benefiting. And the ones who are doing it more like an armchair project, it's just reading the stuff but not actually doing the work, can't really expect to benefit very much. So it's all a matter of engagement.
Andrew, I appreciate your time. Thanks for sending me a copy of the book. Would you like to leave the listeners with a final thought?
I would. This is an approach that can work for everyone. We can't guarantee it will because, like I said, it depends on engagement. But the key is to start with the instruction. The instruction is in the book, and also one-on-one, it's available. And then to just, if as best you can, to do some of this practice every day. Not worry about how much time you're spending, to just sit there, do it as best you can, as best you remember. And so that's reinforcing a very healthy habit. We have bad habits that are easy to develop, but this one we can actually develop over time, and it can definitely make a difference. It's not a matter of doing it and then expecting a result the next day. Like a vending machine, something pops out. It's not like that. But if for people who are interested enough to give it a try, over, weeks and months, and they're engaged, they're going to notice something. Yep.
And the testimonials include people from academia, business, the Canadian Mental Health Association, Nova Scotia Division, and on it goes. And actually some international testimonials associated with the concept and the book itself. It's Mindfulness in the Workplace, Cultivating Wellbeing at Work, authored by our guest, Andrew Safer. Good to have you on the show, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just mention to the listeners that it is available on Amazon, and it will be available, chapters and so on, locally. But right now, Amazon. There are a few titles. There are a few books with the same title. So if they put my name in there, they'll actually come up with this particular book.
Thanks for making time for the program, Andrew. Be well.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we get back, Jennifer's there to talk about the slipway issue down in the gut. What got Kai Divider? Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Jennifer, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. Thank you so much for having me on again.
Happy to do it.
So I just wanted to chat a little bit about where we're at with the slipway. down in Quadavida. We went to the engagement meeting on the 25th. There was a really good show of community members who were all very passionate about this being replaced or repaired. There's no one really who is wanting to see this get lost. So the community has come together, and we've decided to put together a community gathering and information rally on Saturday.
Okay.
So
the wooden slipway itself, it certainly was in dire need of repair. So is the firm proposal here to remove it in full, period?
So they're speaking of full removal or to replace it, but the budget that we got to replace it, I've spoken to some engineers, contractors, and someone from tourism. They gave us over $500,000 budget for the replacement, which is outrageous, and it actually looks like that's for a more of a commercial wharf or slipway. The community doesn't want something else commercial down there. We've lost the entire harbor to private owners and development. So we want to see the heritage and culture preserved down there. We don't see why it needs to go back any different than what it is there now.
That sounds like an awful lot of money to repair what I know to be that slipway.
Yeah, it was. It's a very questionable number, to be honest, Patty. Like I said, I've spoken to several people, and it just doesn't add up to what we need. You know, it might be what developers want down there, but we don't. You know, it's what the community needs is what should matter, not what the developers want to make down there.
I'm sorry, where did that quote come from?
That quote came from the engagement meeting.
Who supplied the quote? Like a specific engineering company or the city? Okay.
The city. So they had hired a contracting company. I think it was DBA or something. It's on the Facebook page that we have there. I don't have the notes in front of me. But it was a consulting company that the government regularly uses for situations like this.
Fair enough. Also, you know, we talk about the inability for people to launch a vessel. You might have to go as far as the small craft harbour to use a crane and that kind of stuff. But is there not another concrete slipway down there?
So there is a boat launch. So there is a boat launch down there. Now, that is in complete disarray. One of the guys were trying to pull their boat up. The boat almost tipped over because the gravel was coming down from underneath them. So that's not overly safe. But the problem with that is just a boat launch. So we can't store our boats there. We can't paint our boats. We can't work on the motors. And it's there's no storage for them. So it says right on that there's no stopping. So you get your boat in, you launch it, and there's nowhere left to tie off. Because they've got the wharf. The wharf won't allow us to tie our boats on to that entire half of the harbor, and we're not able to clean our fish up there either. So we need the slipway for cleaning our fish and storing, and not just for accessing the water.
Fair enough, that makes sense. So, you know, in the big scheme of things, I mean, time doesn't stand still, as much as some residents in Kitty wish it would, because the face of the village, of the gut, has changed over the course of the last number of years. Some of it for the better, some of it maybe not. But what's the general tone in Kitty about change? Because the slipway is a very specific issue, but things are changing. Like, for instance, the ability to go down and sit down and have a bite to eat, and the heritage building that are there and whatnot. Is there a room for the blend of the old and the new?
I'm certainly hoping so, Patty, because the sense of the community is that we're losing our heritage down there to this cookie cutter, tourist attraction. We understand tourism is important 100%, but we've already lost so much. The community has lost so much, and we've gained nothing back. Like the building that was down there, that was the plantation, that's been given away to the art council or the craft council. So that's all local arts and stuff, which is beautiful, but the community can't use the building anymore. So there's stuff down there for tourists to go get a bite to eat and stuff. But as far as like the community, we've lost everything down there. And I can definitely understand maybe, modernizing it a little bit. But we just don't feel that we need a big commercial wharf down there. It's, yeah.
Fair enough. Give the folks the details, where and when for the rally.
So the rally is going to take place down near the Slipway and the Artesian Studio, which was the old plantation. We're going to be starting up around 1 o'clock, and it's going to go till 5. So from 1 to 1:30, it's a community meet and greet. 2:30 to 3:30, we're going to have some speakers. 3:30 to 4:30, 2:30 to 1 to 1:30 is meet and greet. 1:30 to 2:30 is speaker. 2:30 to 3:30 is a community gathering, and then 3:30 to 4:30 is going to be more speakers, and then 5 o'clock we'll be closing up there. We've got some awesome local community members who are going to be coming down and doing some fundraising. There's going to be a lemonade stand. There's going to be some SOS merch. There's local kids who are making bracelets and pictures, and it's just absolutely beautiful. The community is coming out of the woodwork to make sure that this gets preserved.
Appreciate your time, Jennifer. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Patty. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. When we go back, Cavella's in the queue to talk about the appointment of John Hogan to be the interim Minister of Health and Community Services. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 3. Cavell, you're on the air.
Yes, I'm just speaking concerning the portfolios that Mr. Fury gave to the Minister of Justice.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
I think he got 3 portfolios.
Well, he's the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. He's the government House Leader who is responsible for the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, and now the Minister of Health and Community Services. Sounds like a lot.
How is he going to get his work done?
Well, I think sometimes we may indeed possibly overstate just how much responsibility the ministers have. Politically speaking, they have all the responsibility, but the lion's share of the actual work behind the scenes is done by the staff, the senior bureaucrats, the deputy ministers, the assistant deputy ministers, and their staff. So it's not to say that this is appropriate, because I think it's too much for one person to take on, but sometimes we hang a lot of the day-to-day responsibility on ministers when, in fact, that's more political than it is operational.
Well, I can see greed. I see a lot of greed there on both Mr. Fury's part and the Minister of Justice part. There's lots of people now after leaving the university, getting their degrees, looking for a job that could have took that job as Minister of Health.
Well, for the most part, I think the electorate want whoever gets that job to be an actual member of the House of Assembly, an elected official. Not to say that there's not an opportunity to appoint someone outside of that. And what do you mean by greed, Cavell?
Well, I mean, he's going to get extra money, the Minister of Justice, for having 3 portfolios.
No, I don't think so. He just has his rate of pay, he just has more work for the same money.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyhow, like I say, it is too much on each part.
It really feels like it.
They should have had another man besides him being our Minister of Health.
I don't dispute it, and I think that's the popular commentary on this, is that, there's a few things. As to whether or not there was actually anybody else inside the current cabinet that could have taken it on, and someone from the back benches coming up, and I hate to refer to some portfolios as junior, but some are a bit more hefty and a bit more importance, I would suggest, than others. So I'm a little surprised they went this road, to be honest.
Well, what do we know about the Health Department, the Justice Minister?
I don't know if he has any experience. We know that as a lawyer, he has all the background required, I would suggest, to be the Minister of Justice. And I'll leave it up to individuals as to whether or not they think he's doing a good job in that role. But I don't imagine John Hogan has any background regarding health services. I don't think so, anyway.
No, he hasn't. I just hope that the Premier will change it.
Yeah, I think the pressure is mounting for there to be some sort of adjustment here, and I understand exactly why people think that.
Thanks, Betty, for listening to me, my love.
I appreciate your time, Cavell. Thanks for the call.
Bye-bye, dear.
Okay, bye-bye. Yeah, and this is not related to being the Minister of Health Community Services, but we do know, like the drug Ozempic, being used to treat diabetes, is being used off-brand as a weight loss treatment, and apparently working famously. People refer to it as the Hollywood diet, right? The thought that people are offering there is that there are people who actually have diabetes that are using Ozempic and sometimes coming up against a drug shortage on that front. And whether or not it's appropriate for doctors to prescribe it off-label. Well, I mean, it's been going on forever today when they understand eventually down the road that one drug or another has alternative treatments where it can be effective. But what's an economic impact of that is apparently with the Ozempic being used for weight loss, it's sort of done away with some people's cravings for things like snack foods. So the snack food companies are actually getting in on the action here. They're actually talking about whether or not doctors should be prescribing Ozempic for anything other than diabetes because they're worried about their profitability, which is sort of a strange thing to talk about when we're looking at something like a prescription drug, is what the impact it might be on the snack food companies. But apparently that's very real, especially the retail sector in the United States. Those big companies are talking about this quite openly and quite forcefully. Also, what's become a luxury item all of a sudden, given the high prices of cocoa, is chocolate. The chocolate companies are also deathly worried about their sales because the price of the product, the price of the cocoa, is so sky high that consequently, what we're paying for a chocolate bar, and I do appreciate a piece of chocolate, what we're paying for it is starting to explode to the point where, I mean, I'm looking at it thinking, I'm not paying that for a little chocolate bar. So these types of industries, as much as there's a lot of underlying pressures that we really have zero control over, say, for instance, inside the borders of our own country, but those things are happening. And, I mean, for a snack food company to be worried about Ozempic, or the folks who make chocolate bars worried about their bottom line because they have no choice when the product of cocoa is required to make a chocolate bar, and they're paying so much for the cocoa, they're not going to absorb that loss. They're going to pass it on to me and you. But that's weird, the relationship between the economy and healthcare on that front. And very quickly, just another quick mention before we get to the last break of the morning, is I don't know how many people in the country are paying any attention to what's going on, say, for instance, at the NATO summit. And, of course, all the focus on defense spending and support for Ukraine, which, of course, another $500 million, bringing Canada's commitment somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 billion. But also a story that's going to get a lot of traction here today and into the future is some of the vague, unnamed sources from the Prime Minister's office that are basically throwing the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, under the bus. Talking about the way that she's been messaging issues regarding the budget, messaging issues regarding the strength or the state of the economy. And so consequently, even float names around like Bank of Canada Governor and the Bank of England Governor, Mark Carney, as being a possibility. And now we've long heard Mark Carney's name being bandied about as a potential candidate for our leadership position inside the Liberal Party, and or simply as a candidate and as a possible Minister of Finance in the future if the Liberals hold on to the seat of government, which at this moment in time, not so sure. But that's pretty interesting stuff. When the PMO itself is floating around criticisms, unnamed, of course, floating around criticisms of the Deputy Prime Minister, whether or not she deserves it is one thing. But when you talk about political parties and solidarity, that's something that is pretty unusual. It's here, senior cabinet ministers being taken to task. And now Bob Fife at the Globe Mail has got that story out there today. I just read snippets of it during the news break, but that is absolutely going to get some traction. If you're Chrystia Freeland, how long, if you look at the writing on the wall and the possibility for her job to be in peril whenever the next general election is, do you stay on and kind of take that? And you wonder what the interaction is going to be between the Prime Minister and Chrystia Freeland the next time that they get a chance to speak privately. Because if it's me, and the PMO is throwing me under the bus, not so sure I'm sticking with that one. I'm not going to just, grin and bear it, when in fact I think the prime concern that, I don't know what the percentage of Canadians would be, but people's primary concern seems to be with the Prime Minister. Not with Chrystia Freeland. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who are not supporters of the Liberal government have distinct problems with Chrystia Freeland, but seemingly the polls seem to be dragged in one direction or another, and in this case is being dragged down. If you look at the polls and take them at face value, it's the Prime Minister, isn't it? Anyway, there will be continued calls for his resignation or leadership review. The party has rejected that out of hand, so I'm not so sure they're doing themselves any favors, but interesting to see the PMO floating around Chrystia Freeland's name as being the problem. Let's take our final break of the morning. When we come back, Jerry's in the queue. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Jerry, you're on the air.
Hi, my name is Jerry Hearn, originally from Petty Harbour, and I live in the little city down in the Kittavity area these days. Anyways, I do a lot of trout fishing down Kittavity Harbour and so on and so forth. And off that little slipway where the local residents had their boats hauled up, so on and so forth. And I walked over that slipway. I'm in the construction stuff business now. I know structural stuff. I'm not an engineer, but I built things, so on and so forth, in that capacity. But anyways, there's a few bad planks on that slipway, like right down towards where the tide is at and comes halfway up. Perfect, not a blemish. It's just the top half where it's exposed, and there are small areas, probably 3 or 4 feet long, that needs replacement. Like I heard the quote from the lady said that an engineering group had done a feasibility study for replacement at $500,000. Now, in my humble opinion, knowing how to build stuff, if you replace the bad planks, it's like in your house. If you've got a bad sill in your house, you're not going to tear down the house and replace the house. No, you'll mitigate the damage and replace the affected areas. Same with that slipway down there. Most of the slipway, 95% of it, is worthy. Like the planks, there's no rot. I walked around it, so in and out, up and down. I even crawled underneath it at low tide to have a look at the underneath structure, and it's fine. So there are a few planks that need to be replaced because, yes, it's open, and I guess we're afraid that under liability, on whose jurisdiction, City of St. John's, Small Craft Harbour, or whoever, that if those were replaced, I say a maximum, and I mean you got to stretch it, $40,000-$50,000 to replace all that's needed on that. But the superstructure underneath is solid as a cliff. So, and like I say, and they're trying to displace where local people traditionally haul their speedboats up because that other slippery over, and like the woman said, it's not very healthy. And like, why do you need, if you haven't got a big boat trailer and a big expense to go through, and historically, people have hauled their boats up on the slipway for years and years and years. I'm in the city now about 15 years, and it's been the same ever since.
Yeah, look, I have seen the slipway recently enough to know that it doesn't look to me, and I have an untrained eye, but it doesn't look to me like it needs to be replaced in full. And you make a good point. If I have a problem with one part of my house, I don't tear the house down. I repair the damage. But I don't know why that's not even the go-to option here. I don't even know why there's any consideration of removing it in full. There must be something else at play.
Yeah, like you say, between the bureaucrats and whoever's behind the scenes and lobbying the bureaucrats at City Hall, to get involved with this. There's a smelly fish in the barrel somewhere. So when you look at behind the scenes, and I'm not sure because I haven't gone to Crown Land to look and see if there's public land or private land. Because I think it was private land to be buried out in the first place. But I think they're looking at liabilities because there's a few bad planks there. Yes, and you slipped and broke your leg. And yes, it had a problem, but you got warning signs up that says "Do not enter," so on and so forth. But I've been doing it all the time. Go down there, go fishing, and not only me, but lots of other people in the general area like to go down with the fly rod and cast out for a little sea trout there. But in regards to safety, like I said, that's all that needs to be done. Because I tell you, in my hometown, Petty Harbour, there was a slipway there like that. And the local harbour authorities said, no, it's undeemed safe. So I said, why don't you replace the bar parts, or if you want to go to Small Craft Harbour and lobby a federal member for the new slipway, because at that time I could haul up my speedboat like any other person in Petty Harbour, same as Kitty Bitty. No, they removed it. They made another berth for another boat, because somebody that was on the local Harbour Authorities Committee, and it cost approximately $290,000 to replace and dig it out, get a contract to dig it out, and put wharfage there where the slipway once was. And I guess there was a number of other people in Petty Harbour who used that slipway and were upset that the local Harbour Authorities said, no, we're going to do this. So, like I said, there's a bit of politics behind that, even in St. John's, in regards to those feasibility studies. But as like we had just discussed, get a good assessment. If you looked at in replacing parts, that slipway, good for another 20 years plus.
Fair enough. No argument coming from me. But you talk about might be privately owned. A private citizen can't own that piece of property. There's something called riparian rights in Canada, so access to things like boating and fishing and swimming and those types of things.
Yes,
and that's managed by, generally speaking, this is a federally managed piece of property. And of course, the city has some control over decision-making about repair or replacement of things like slipways. But we all have an access right in Canada. It's called a riparian right. And so, yeah, that's the basics of that one.
Yeah, and sadly, like I say, no one's really listened to the local people and its constituents of the area. So I'm not sure who the representation is in that local area from the federal person should be looking at, as well as the city councillor that's representing that particular area to do the constitute your constituencies stuff what you got voted in for, and if small craft harbor are like kind of squawking about it and all liabilities and so on and so forth, well, this is where you got to lobby those federal members to say, hey, what about it? And historically, people have used that area for time regards to putting the boat. Like I say, as long as I've been in and fishing,
the connection's breaking up and getting poor here, Jerry.
Yes, okay, but East Coast because
yeah, it's really breaking up. I can't hear you at all, Jerry, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, so just because of the connection, we'll have to leave that one at that, but I appreciate Jerry's time. Of course we do. Final word this morning goes to line number 2. Daryl, you're on the air.
Oh, hi, Paddy. How you doing today?
Not bad, thanks. You?
Oh, doing great. It's all good. Paddy, what I want to talk about today is, Premier Fury announced mandatory of breast cancer screening, like I think 40 plus, which is, I'm glad he done that. It's all steps in the right direction, but he needs to add more to this. How about for men, the prostate? Because under the guidelines, a physician don't have to check off on a sheet for check your prostate, because the guidelines states, I've read up on it, like Cancer Society, whatever, that when you're having issues, you get your prostate checked. Now, most physicians will check off for the blood work anyhow. But the thing is with the prostate, a lot of people don't realize, I know of 3 or 4 cases. So happened people just went and got their blood work done, checked, and discovered that they had cancer. And the reason why, when cancer starts with the prostate, it starts on the outer lining, and you don't notice it. You don't even feel no symptoms. But so with the time you do feel the symptoms, it's too late because it's gone full-fledged, and then it could spread into the bones and so forth. So I'll reiterate back, we'll go back to the Health Accord, which they, part of their mandate, and I said in on their sessions, is that to promote healthiness and prevention. So this is another scenario. So I think they should put in, like the breast cancer screening, the prostate should be mandatory too. Like, I don't know, 40 over, or no cap to any age, because people of different ages are getting sick this day and age. So we want to prevent. Well, this is where we got to start. And I remember Premier Fury saying the model of the 60s don't work anymore. So in other words, we got to get more modern with the times. And I think this is what got to come to flourish. Right. Now, we're not talking about anything being mandated regarding breast cancer screening, getting mammogram, and or getting your prostate checked. Right. What we're really talking about is guidelines put forward by the national bodies as to when the appropriate age is. And unfortunately, there hasn't been an adoption of some of those recommended changes in some provinces regarding breast cancer screening. Some provinces are still sticking with 50 versus the recommendation of 40. And we know that even women younger than that can get breast cancer. But, you know,
that's a choice that individual men will make as to whether or not they ask their doctor for that type of screening, whether it be the digital rectal exam or the PSA test, which is problematic in and of itself because the false positives see some pretty harmful procedures take place when they're not necessary. Anyway, you're right. I mean, prevention and early diagnosis leads to a better prognosis of positive healthcare outcomes.
Well, Paddy, if they go, this is the problem. If they go by the guidelines for the prostate, they don't have to check your prostate. The guidelines more or less states, I've read, if you're having guide you, like if you're having this symptoms or that symptoms, then go and get your prostate checked. And if a doctor technically went by the guidelines, he don't have to check your prostate until you're having issues. And the problem with that, once you're having issues, it's too late.
Yeah,
so
you can request prostate screening once you hit your 40s. That's no problem. I don't think doctors reject a prostate screening at that age.
No, you're right. They don't reject it because, like my myself, they'll just check it off anyhow. But what I'm saying is, if they went by the guidelines, they don't have to, even though they do it. But but what I'm saying is, I think what they should do, like the breast screening, like they done here in this province, I think they should put the prostate as well, and just say, okay, whatever age you got to be checked or whatever, like what they've done recently with breast cancer screening.
Fair enough.
And check, and I totally agree with all that, but I think we should go a step further and for the men for the prostate as well.
Appreciate the time. We've just cleared 12 o'clock. Thanks, Daryl.
Okay, thanks for your time. All the best to you, Paddy.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, Daryl did indeed have the last word, but we will pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.